बेस एंड एपेक्स ये कॉन्सेप्शन में ले लिए तो वो सरफेस उसमें ही चला गया. बेस itself is the posterior surface of superior surface. Base is directed upward, backward to the right, and apex.
Let us see the slide share. So heart. The heart is a hollow, cone-shaped muscular pump. The heart beats about 2.5 million times in an average lifetime. The left side of the heart pumps blood through an estimated 120,000 kilometers of blood vessels, which is equivalent to traveling around the Earth equator about 3 times. The right side of the heart pumps blood through the lungs, enabling blood to pick up oxygen and unload carbon dioxide. Heart pumps more than about 40,000 liters of blood in a day, or 5 million liters in a year. Dimensions of the heart. The heart is a small organ. It is about 12 centimeters or 5 inch long, 9 centimeters or 3.5 inch width, and its broadest point and 6 centimeters or 2.5 inch in thickness, with an average mass of 250 grams in adults female and 300 grams in adult males. The heart rests on the diaphragm near the midline of the thoracic cavity. The heart lies in the mediastinum, an anatomical region that extends from the sternum to the vertebral column, from the first rib to the diaphragm, and between the lungs. Actually, within mediastinum, it is in middle mediastinum. Mediastinum has also got certain parts, superior mediastinum and inferior mediastinum. Inferior mediastinum has got anterior, middle and posterior mediastinum. So heart is situated in middle mediastinum. Relations of heart. Superiorly, the aorta, superior vena cava, pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein. Inferiorly, the diaphragm. Anteriorly, the ribs and the intercostal muscles. Posteriorly, the esophagus, trachea, left and right bronchus, descending aorta, inferior vena cava and thoracic vertebrae. Laterally, the lungs. Here you can see a transverse section on your skin, and anterior aspect is above and posterior aspect is below, and you can see heart is situated between the two lungs in middle mediastinum. The pointed apex is formed by the tip of left ventricle and rests on the diaphragm. It is directed anteriorly, inferiorly and to the left. The base of the heart is its posterior surface. It is formed by the atria of the heart. Surfaces. The sternocostal or anterior surface is deep to the sternum and ribs. The diaphragmatic or inferior surface is the part of the heart between the apex and the right border. The pulmonary or left surface is occupying the cardiac notch of the left lung. Here you can see a diagram where the cardiac part have been done translucent in lungs, and you can see the exact location of heart between the two lungs anterior border, and you can see cardiac notch an precordial region where heart is directly related to the thoracic cavity. You can see the borders also: superior border, right border, inferior border, left border. You can see apex of the heart directed downward, forward and to the left, and base upward, backward to the right. Borders. The right border is formed by right atrium and it faces the right lungs and extends from the inferior surface to the base. The inferior border is formed by right ventricle and partly left ventricle. The left border, also called the pulmonary border, it is formed by the left ventricle and the left auricle, and it faces the left lung and extends from the base of the base to the apex. The superior border is formed by both atria. So here you can see along the midline, and it extends from here. You can see second rib, you can see sternum, and below it is resting on diaphragm, and you can see location of the apical pulse. Sulci of heart. It is a groove on the outer surface of the heart, marking the divisions between the atria and the ventricle. Atrioventricular sulcus, anterior interventricular sulcus, and posterior interventricular sulcus. These are the prominent sulcus. Apart from this, there are some improminent sulcus which are not visible due to appendages of the heart. Now here you can see these sulci are occupied by coronary arteries and veins, like an ornament placing on the neck. Atrioventricular sulcus. It separates the atria from ventricle. It contains right coronary artery, left coronary artery, circumflex artery, coronary sinus. Anterior interventricular sulcus lies between left ventricle and right ventricle. On the anterior surface marks location of interventricular septum containing left anterior descending artery and great cardiac vein. Posterior interventricular sulcus lies between left ventricle and right ventricle. On posterior surface contains posterior interventricular artery and middle cardiac vein. Pericardial sinuses. The lines of reflection between visceral and parietal pericardium forms two pericardial sinuses. The transverse pericardial sinus lies anterior to the superior vena cava and posterior to the ascending aorta and pulmonary trunk. The oblique pericardial sinus lies posterior to the heart in the pericardial sac. The transverse pericardial sinus and the oblique pericardial sinus is here have been pointed by that left side it is by an artery forceps, and here by the simple forceps. You can see the transverse sinus on left side and oblique sinus on right side. So this is anterior surface of heart. Now auricle. Anterior surface of each atrium is a wrinkled pouch with pouch-like structure called an auricle. Auricle means ear, but here it appears like ear, and it is like a pouch. When a pouch is filled up, the ear becomes straightened, and when the pouch becomes empty, the ear is folded down. Posterior surface of the heart, here you can see coverings of the heart, that is pericardium. The heart is enclosed in a double-walled sac called a pericardium. It contains two main parts, the fibropericardium and serous pericardium. The fibrous pericardium is composed of tough, inelastic, dense, irregular connective tissue. The functions of fibrous pericardium is to prevent overstretching of the heart, protection of the heart, anchors the heart in the mediastinum. Relationship of serous pericardium of the heart, here you can see pericardial cavity is like a water-filled balloon, and during development the heart is pushed inside that balloon, and hence the heart remains outside this serous pericardium. You have to understand this very well. Heart remains outside this serous pericardium. Although serous pericardium is covering the heart, but heart remains outside this sac. The serous pericardium is a thinner membrane that forms a double layer around the heart. The outer parietal layer, it is fused to the fibrous pericardium, and the inner visceral layer is also called the epicardium, and it is tightly adhered to the heart itself. The pericardial layers and layers of the heart is visible in this diagram. You can see fibrous from above downwards or outside inwards, fibrous pericardium, parietal layer of serous pericardium, pericardial cavity, epicardium or visceral layer of serous pericardium, then myocardium, then endocardium and heart chamber. So this is the sequence from outside inwards. A slippery fluid is present in between the parietal and visceral layer, helps to give lubrication and reduces friction while the heart beats, is the pericardial fluid. The space between the two layers are called pericardial cavity. Here you can see layers of the heart wall. The wall of the heart consists of three layers: epicardium, myocardium and endocardium. And outside there is some adipose tissue. Epicardium, here you can see epicardium. It is a thin transparent outer layer of the heart wall. It is composed of mesothelium, that is a membrane composed of simple squamous cell. The epicardium contains blood vessels, lymphatics and vessels that supplies the myocardium. Myocardium. The myocardium is responsible for the pumping action of the heart and is composed of cardiac muscle tissue. The muscle fibers are wrapped and bundled with connective tissue sheath composed of endomysium and perimysium. The cardiac muscle fibers are organized in bundles that swell diagonally around the heart and generate strong pumping action of the heart. Here you can see the structures, the histology of this myocardium. It is somewhat similar with the skeletal muscle, but there are some differences also. Here you can see syncytial cells are there. Circular and spiral arrangement of cardiac muscles. So this is the arrangement of skeletal system formed by the muscle itself, which enables the spiral movement of apex of the heart. Endocardium. The endocardium is the glistening white sheet of endothelium or squamous cell epithelium resting on thin connective tissue layer. It lines the heart chamber and covers the fibrous skeleton of the valves. The endocardium is continuous with the endothelial lining of the blood vessels leaving the entering the heart. The chambers of the heart. The heart has 4 chambers: the 2 superior receiving chamber at the atria and the 2 inferior pumping chambers are ventricles. So this is how it appears: 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The right atrium. The right atrium forms the right border of the heart and receives blood from 3 veins: the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, the coronary sinus The right atrium is about 2 to 3 mm in thickness. The posterior wall is smooth, but the anterior wall is rough due to presence of muscular ridges called musculi pectinati or pectinate muscles. The right atrium and left atrium is separated by interatrial septum. A prominent feature of this septum is an oval depression called as fossa ovalis. Blood passes from the right atrium into the right ventricle through a valve that is called as tricuspid valve. It consists of 3 leaflets of cusp. Here you can see there are 3 muscular ridges. They are tendon of Todaro, Torus aorticus, and limbus fossa ovalis. There is, you can see a fossa ovalis. Then there is area of SA node and area of AV node, that is triangle of Koch. So these are the features. Along with openings, you can see opening for superior vena cava, opening for inferior vena cava, right atrioventricular opening, opening for coronary sinus. Among these, opening for superior vena cava don't have any valve due to presence of AC node, SA node. Now inferior vena cava is guarded by Eustachian valve, and opening for coronary sinus is guarded by Thebesian valve, and right atrioventricular opening is guarded by, as I already told you, that is tricuspid valve. Now the cusp of the tricuspid valve are connected to tendon-like cord, chordae tendoni, which in turn are connected to cone-shaped trabeculi carni called trabeculi carni, and among trabeculi carni some special muscular cell, that is papillary muscles. Right ventricle. The right ventricle is about 4 to 5 mm in average thickness, forms the most anterior surface of the heart. The right ventricle contains a series of ridges. Here also trabeculi carni is formed. The right ventricle is separated from left ventricle by interventricular septum. Blood passes from right ventricle through pulmonary valves into large artery called pulmonary trunk, which divides into right and left pulmonary arteries. Here you can see the structures. Now coming to left atrium. The left atrium is about same thickness as right atrium and forms most of the base of the heart. It receives blood from the lungs through pulmonary veins, and it is guarded by bicuspid or mitral valve, the left atrioventricular